All right, students, welcome to Chapter 11. Here we're talking more about reports. Specifically, Chapter 11, it's more about how to organize and structure your report. Chapter 9, a couple chapters back, was primarily about how to do the research methodology, how to gather your research for a report. So when I mentioned in Chapter 9, it's important to learn how to do these reports. Will you do a lot of them in your business career? Maybe, maybe not, but it's important to know these. One, you will be reading reports, and so you need to understand kind of how to digest these. And also when you do your upper division work and you go to finish off your 4-year degree, those professors are probably going to give you a lot of research papers and assignments. So it doesn't hurt to understand the structure behind this, and because those will likely be business courses, you'll probably be writing some more analytical reports. So we want to tackle this. I know you're probably not super excited about writing an analytical report. It is a requirement of the class, and it is a good skill to learn. So when we talk about writing an analytical report or a business research report, organization is half the key. So with these reports, they're going to have a pretty specific structure as far as how you put them together. There's going to be headings, there's going to be new sections, you're going to be using graphs and charts. So all of that needs to be combined into a visually appealing and easy to read document. So organization is the biggest challenge in battle in putting together this report. Getting the research is pretty simple about schools comparing MBA programs. Putting it all together in an analytical, comparative report that's easy to read and has good research and comparative data, that's going to be the harder part. So there's 3 sections to the report. Let me just top line this for you first. And these do not have titles or headings within the report. So when I talk about these sections, this is just internal for you as the writer to know that these are the different sections of the report. So I want to stress that you don't actually write these section names anywhere in the report. The 3 sections of your report are: first, you have preliminary. The preliminary parts of the report precede the page count. So these are the window dressing pieces of the report that precede the actual writing of the report itself. And here you'll have the cover page, a table of contents, and an executive summary. I'll get into that more later. So you have the preliminary section report. And then the next main section report is what we call the report text, or the body of the report. And that's really the bulk of your report. That's you doing your analysis of the schools and having comparisons and making a recommendation on to which one's the best. So, and within the report text, you're going to have an introduction section. Now that does show up as a title in your paper. You're going to have an analysis section. That main section also does show up in your paper. And you're going to have a final recommendation section. So the introduction, analysis, or criteria analysis, and final recommendation, those are your main headers, main sections of the report. And those will show up on your report. And then the third main area of your report, section that is not titled, but just you as a writer to know that, is what's called the addendum section. And that's oftentimes where we put appendix items, but it also includes your works cited. So the 3 sections of the report: preliminary, I'm getting my camera's reversed here, preliminary, report text, and addendum. Those are the main sections of the report. We don't see those titles anywhere in the report. The preliminary section of the report includes the cover page, table of contents, and the executive summary. The report text section includes an introduction section, which does have a heading, an analysis by criteria section, which does have a heading, and a final recommendation section, which does have a heading. And then the addendum section of the report has your works cited, which is another section that also has a heading. Okay, so the other thing that is most important to stress about the analytical report is that when you set up this report, you're going to write the report, and the bulk of it is analysis by criteria point. You write the report and do the school comparisons by criteria point, not by school. You set up the report and do the analysis by criteria point, not by school. I want to stress that. So for example, you've done your introduction section of the report where you talk about the purpose of the report and overview of the schools, and an overview of what an MBA is, and an overview of here's the criteria I'm going to use to evaluate the schools. And then you get into your analysis by criteria section. And maybe your first criteria point is cost. So you have a paragraph that explains for costs, we're going to be looking at blankety blank data. And then you have your graphic. It's a bar chart or something comparing the cost. And then it has a quick paragraph after that graphic that summarizes who won and why. That's the flow of your criteria analysis. So you have cost, and then you move on to criteria point number 2. Maybe it's accessibility. How easy or hard is it to get into that school? And you'll tick through each criteria point, and that's your analysis section. And then that leads to the final recommendation where you kind of sum up who won each of these criteria points, and you have a winner. But you set up the report, again, by criteria point, not by school. So please write it in that fashion and only in that fashion. All right, so these are your key terms that you should know out of Chapter 11. Again, this is primarily for your quiz. I'm going to talk about these in more detail on the subsequent slides, but make sure that you have these definitions in your pocket, meaning you have them down before you finish up this lecture. And if not, turn to the textbook. Okay, here's your learning objectives for Chapter 11, just these 4. You want to know the components of a formal report. I just kind of top line those in your very first slide. You want to know the difference between short reports and form reports. That's listed in Chapter 11. My lecture is going to be primarily on how to do the analytical report. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on short reports and form reports, but I will touch on them lightly. I will spend some time also on Objective 3, which is proposals. You're not writing any proposals in this class, but it is something you should understand what they are and the different types of proposals. In business, a lot of work is done by a company will have a request for a proposal from a supplier or a vendor, and then the vendor, the other company, writes a proposal on here's what it's going to cost for us to provide this service to you. That's a proposal. So we'll look at those lightly on Chapter 11. And then really the meat and potatoes out of Chapter 11 is you should walk out of this lecture and this chapter with the ability to compose a properly formatted and researched analytical report. The formatting and structure part is going to be out of this chapter, Chapter 11, and the research of the analytical report, how to do the proper research, is back on Chapter 9. I've put together a little summary sheet of terms you should definitely read out of Chapter 11. So you see these 5 bullet points, the definition of what an analytical report is, and this is the page number. This is for the 9th edition of the textbook. And then the parts of the report. You're going to see that on this next slide. And we're not doing all of the parts that are listed. So just because they're parts of report, you don't have to do all of them. So we're kind of doing this somewhere between a short and a long formal report version. And I'll cover the parts of the report that you need on the very next slide. You should also understand what an executive summary is. With business reports, the summary comes up front. The summary comes up front. It's the first thing we see. And then we recap it again at the end. We'll explain what that is in coming slides. Outlining and table of contents. Before you write your report, you should write out a roadmap, an outline, kind of top lining. Here's my main sections. And with all of the different headings that I gave to you in the opening slide that you'll need for your report, and you'll see these again in subsequent slides coming up. That's really kind of like, okay, I've got my main sections. Now I just need to fill it in with words and graphs. So, and you'll be at your page count in no time. So the outline turns into your table of contents, which in the table of contents is really listing all the headings, sections of your report. And then headings are listed on page 198. All right, so let's go over the parts of your analytical report that you will need one more time. I did this kind of quick at the very opening slide of this lecture, but now that you've got this table in front of you, and this is figure 11-1, which is page 192 of your textbook if you want to double check it there. Again, there's 3 sections to your report. These sections don't have titles, aren't mentioned in the report. It's just so you know, here's the different buckets of my report. Preliminary parts, the report text, and the addenda. The preliminary parts precede the page count of the report. The preliminary parts that you will need, I also call them prefatory. The preliminary parts would be a title page, and you see that over there, title page. Trying to point it where it needs to be, which is basically has the title of your report, comparison of MBA programs, prepared by your name, prepared for my name is the instructor, Grossmont College, and the date of the report. You'll have a title page. You don't need a title fly, which is a cover page for the cover page. You don't need an authorization letter, which is saying you are approved to write this report. You don't need a transmittal, which is kind of an introductory letter about here's the report. So you don't need those. You do need a title page. You do need a table of contents. Table of contents lists all the sections of the report. And you do need an executive summary. And as it says there, it summarizes the essential elements of the report. The executive summary is a boiled down, mini distilled version of your full report. So it's going to include the purpose of the report, a quick top line of the criteria points and who won each criteria point, and your final recommendation. That's all going to be listed in your executive summary. So that's your preliminary parts: title page, table of contents, executive summary. You also don't need, I kind of skipped past that one, a table of figures. The table of figures is a table of contents for all your graphs and charts in your report. So you do not need to have one of those in this report. Okay, and then we move to the report text. So the report text really has 3 sections. There's the introductory section, there's the analysis section, and there's the final recommendation section. Those are the headings that I'm asking you to use for your report. I know the names I'm giving you are slightly different than what you see in figure 11-1 on this slide. So, but the introductory section of the report text is going to include the purpose of the report, an overview of the schools, just a quick, here's where they're located, here's how long they've been around, here's their areas of specialty. No analysis information. Quick background on the schools. Quick background on what is an MBA, how long have they been around, what's the purpose of an MBA. And also an explanation of your criteria points. What's the criteria, the yardstick by which you're going to measure the schools. Explain each criteria, the data you're going to use to analyze that criteria point, and how a school wins that criteria point. Okay, so that's all part of your introductory section of the report. The introductory section means you're not doing any analysis yet. You're just kind of giving the reader everything they need to do to understand before you get to the actual analysis piece. And then here it says body, but instead of body, we're going to say it's actually the analysis section. So that's where you actually go by criteria point in order and compare the schools on each criteria point. The introductory section is going to have a main heading like an all caps introduction, 12-point font, and then you might have some subheadings. So the introduction might be all caps as a main heading. And here we're talking about hierarchy of headings, main headings, subheadings. And the hierarchy is basically the main heading is the biggest, it's all caps, 12-point font. You're not going to be doing like 20-point font or anything crazy to try to increase your page count. But that'd be your main heading, all caps, and then your subheadings like introduction and overview of schools. Those subheadings would just have initial caps where the first letter of each word is capitalized. Initial caps. So there's a hierarchy to your headings. You have the introductory section. That's a main heading, and when that introduction section is done, whether it's 2 full pages or 2.5 pages, it's going to stop and you're going to start the next section, criteria analysis or analysis section, on a brand new fresh page. So these main sections of the report will each start on a new page. So just the main sections: introduction, analysis, final recommendation. You do your analysis, that's where all our graphs and charts come into play. It's done by criteria point. And then your third main section of the report text is the final recommendation. Again, all caps. And that would have a table that kind of scorecards who won each criteria point, and a summary paragraph beneath that recapping who won and why. That's your report text section. And then your third section of your report is the addenda. So oftentimes we have appendix items, and that's like extra stuff, like here's a 5-year study of postgraduate salaries from all of these schools, and it's a bunch of data tables and it's a lot of information. It's interesting, but it's really too much to put into the report, so you put in there as an appendix item. You don't need any appendix items in this report, but you do need the reference section, which is really called a list of works cited, or a works cited page. Since we're using the MLA format, you're going to have a works cited page. That's what we mean by references. So that's going to have its own main heading. And this part, the list of works cited, does count towards your page count. So if you have a long works cited, that helps you with your page count. Now, all those sources cited in your works cited have to show up in your paper. We talked about this in Chapter 9. So if this is unclear to you, if the how to do the MLA format and cite your sources is unclear to you, please go back to the Chapter 9 lecture and review that. It's also listed in your analytical report submission assignments for the Step 4 and Step 5. You can link back to those lectures as well. Okay, so that's the parts of a formal report. All right, so back to the preliminary part of a report. And you can look at the analytical report sample that I've posted under the analytical report resource page, which is in your Canvas site. If you go to the Canvas site under the Start Here module, under the Start Here module or the Welcome module, you'll see a bunch of additional resources listed in there. And one of them is the analytical report resource page. Or the course resources page, and then within course resources you'll see the analytical report resource page, and it gives you a sample of an analytical report to look at in there. The preliminary part of the report doesn't count towards the page count. So here's where it gets a little tricky. Your report is going to have two different types of page numbers. The preliminary part of your report is going to have lowercase Roman numeral lettering. Why? Because this is just how it is. This is how they've been doing these academic reports for a long time. So your page numbers under the preliminary section of your report, which is going to include your cover letter, table of contents, and executive summary, they're going to be lowercase Roman numerals. So your cover letter, which is your very first page of your report, would technically be it'd be a lowercase I, right? Because Roman numerals are, right, capital I's and the V's and the X's. So it'd be a lowercase I. However, cover pages never have page numbers on them. So your cover page is not going to have a page number on it. It's going to be blank. But your next page is your table of contents. And it's your second preliminary page within your analytical report as far as the preliminary section. So the table of contents would be lowercase II, Roman numeral 2, right? II is meaning for 2. So this should show on the sample that I posted for you under the analytical report resource page. And then your third preliminary part is your executive summary. So your cover page is the first page, your table of contents is your second page, or it could be more than one page if it's longer than one. And then your third page would be your executive summary. And if it was in the third page order of your preliminary part of your report, it would be lowercase III. That's the page number. So it gets a little tricky on how you split the report into two different page number styles. You have lowercase Roman numerals for the preliminary section, And then you have your standard Arabic. Yes, that's where numbers originated from. Arabic numbering came out of Persia. That's our numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that we all use. That's going to start with the report text part of the report. But depending what you use, Word or Google Docs, it doesn't make it easy to change the page numbers in a report. You kind of get all of one type of page number or all of another. What you can do is put a page break between the preliminary section into the new section, and you should be able to change the numbers from one format to another there, or just type them up as two separate documents. You'll have a document for the preliminary section and a document for the rest of the report, and then you can switch the page numbers there. Okay, but do not count the preliminary section of your report towards your official page count. Your official page count starts with the report text: introduction, analysis, final recommendation, list of works cited. That all counts towards your page count, not the preliminary section. So if you were to number your preliminary section as pages 1, 2, and 3, it's going to cost you some points on your report because that's incorrect page numbering for the report. So here's your preliminary sections: cover page, table of contents. You see I crossed out table of figures. That is something that would be part of a preliminary report if it was required. I'm not requiring that you do that. So it's a table of contents for all the graphs and charts, if you will. That's your table of figures. You don't need it for your report. So let's talk a little bit more about an executive summary. And an executive summary is specific to business reports, and they put the summary up front. It's in the prefatory section, and it's called an executive summary because you're a busy executive and you have all these reports that you have to read through, and somebody gives you a big fat binder of a report that you have to read, and you don't want to read the whole thing. So you're going to flip to the preliminary section and read the executive summary first. And the executive summary is going to say, here's how we analyzed this situation, this problem, and here's our recommendation for the company as to what we should do. And then if you want to dive deeper into the different sections of the report, you can go and read the rest of the report from there. So that's what an executive summary is about. So it helps the reader kind of understand a long, complex report. It cuts to the chase without having to read the entire report first. And you can see on the second bullet point on this slide, it summarizes these major sections: the intro, the summary of main points, which is really your criteria analysis in this report, and then your concluding recommendations. So you see how that bullet point number 2, major sections, that's what I was just talking about in the previous slide. You have an introductory section, you have a analysis by criteria section, and you have a final recommendation section. So the name here is just slightly different: summary of main points. The third bullet point of talking headings, that just means that the headings in your report should be descriptive. I believe we covered this in a previous chapter, but instead of having a heading, maybe it's on a graph or chart that you're using, and that was out of chapter 10, week 10 of the lecture series. Instead of having a graph title that says comparison of postgraduate salaries, that could be a chart title as a heading, but a talking heading version of that would be something along the lines of UCSD has the highest postgraduate salaries amongst all schools. So the talking heading is actually providing some information, who actually won. So that's the difference. Talking heading is more descriptive in language. So feel free to use talking headings in the report. Okay, we've done our preliminary section: cover page, table of contents, executive summary, and now we're shifting gears into the meat and potatoes of the report body, or the report text. So both of those terms are kind of interchangeable. And you see here I've listed the main sections of the report: introduction, analysis, and conclusion or final recommendation. You can use either of those terms. These are your main headings. These would be all caps in the report. Don't use outline numbers. Do not use outline numbers for your headings. We're not writing an outline, we're writing a report. But this would be a main heading, introduction, all caps. And then underneath that, we'd have our subheadings, purpose of report, and then a short paragraph explaining what's the purpose of report. And then another subheading, overview of schools, and a couple of short paragraphs, one for each school, reviewing the schools. I don't have it listed here, but you should probably also have another subheading for overview of MBA. Quick explanation, just a short paragraph of what is an MBA and why you should get one. And then another subheading, overview of criteria. Explain the criteria points. What are the criteria points? What's the data that you'll use to look at for each criteria point? And how does the school win each criteria point? That's your introductory section. And then on a fresh new page within your report, you start doing your analysis section. Criteria 1, little introductory text, the graphic comparing the schools, and a short paragraph wrapping up on who won and why. So boom, boom, boom. Going through your criteria points could be cost, accessibility, culture, credibility, or the quality of the school. Those could all be criteria points. And then your third main heading, the conclusion or final recommendation. That's going to be pretty much a short, maybe half a page. You could have a table with a scorecard on who won each criteria point on a 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 scale. And then a short paragraph beneath that, recapping who won and why. Those are the sections of your report text part of your report. This is the bulk of your report. And then your last section is your addenda section. Again, you don't title these in the report. So there's not going to be any title in your report that says report text. And there's not going to be any title in your report that says preliminary section. And there's not going to be any title in your report that says report addenda. Your addenda section is really just going to be your works cited. You see I've crossed out the appendix and a subject index. You could have those in a report. I'm not requiring those of you for your report. So you will have a works cited. Works cited using the MLA format. If this is unclear to you, please go back to the Chapter 9 lecture slides, and towards the end of that lecture, I've got some embedded videos, and the URLs are on the Week 9 resource page that you can watch on those tutorials on how to cite sources both in works cited form and parenthetically in text within the report. Remember, anytime you have detailed information in your report, facts, figures, numbers, historical data, enrollment data, all of that came from a source, and therefore it needs to be cited. It's an analytical report. It's a research report. It's supposed to have lots of citations within the report. It's a mixture of here's where I got this information, along with some of your own personal written commentary. So you don't want to have your report be completely all citations, just cut and paste, chunk, 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 chunk. Here's a bunch of words from different sources. You want to have your own opinion, but your opinion is supported heavily through your research, which is where you're going to show your citations. Does that make sense? So you should have plenty of citations. And your works cited is a list of all of the sources, works, that you cited in your paper. So anything that's on your works cited needs to show up as a citation somewhere within your paper. So citations have two parts. There's the works cited page at the end of your report. Here's all my sources. And then each of those sources needs to be cited parenthetically, meaning within parentheses, in the text, meaning somewhere in that paragraph where you're talking about that certain topic and you researched that source to help support your opinion on that topic. At the end of that paragraph, parentheses, parentheses, Scharff 132, if it was a book I wrote and it was on page 132. Typically author and page number. And you can look at those YouTube tutorials on citing sources in the MLA format. It explains how to do those parenthetical citations if you have an author. If you don't have an author, if it's just a website, that's all listed there in those tutorials for you. Very important that you get the citations part correctly. If your works cited is just a string of URLs, that's the wrong way to cite sources. This is going to hurt your grade significantly. If your report has no citations in it, too hard to do, Nate, I'm not going to tackle it, you're going to get a 0 on the report, a 0, with an opportunity to resubmit it again for a maximum grade of a C. So you need to do the citations piece, and if you're stuck, please reach out to me. I want to make sure that you tackle this piece correctly. So before you dive into the pond and start writing this report, you want to have a plan. The best way to lay out a plan is to outline your report. What's the outline going to look like? It's going to have the sections of the report that I was just talking about in the previous slides. So step number 1, after you've is gather all your research. Get a bunch of research, and now you have all the research, and now you want to outline your report. So here's my introductory section. Here's my analysis section. Here's the criteria points that I'm going to use for that. Here's my final recommendation. And that helps you start writing your report. Now, if you're savvy on Word, Word has an outline feature. So, you know, when you're in PowerPoint and you've got a slide sorter view or presentation mode, there's a bunch notes view. Word also has a variety of views, and one of the views is outline view. And if you use the outline view, you can you can actually just set up all your outlines, the sections of your report, type them right there in Word in the outline view. And if you want to learn how to do this, simply Google Microsoft Word outline view, and you'll find some tutorials there that'll show you how to do this. And if you do that, if you outline in Word first, it automatically makes those your headings for you in your report. And even more slick, if you start an outline view, you can take those outlines and you can, when you're all done writing your report, you can go Insert and select Table and select Table of Contents, and it'll take that outline view and build your table of contents and populate it with the page numbers automatically. Because writing a table of contents can be a fair amount of work. You want to do that at the very end because your page numbers are always moving around as you write your report. So the outline view enables you to do it automatically. Whether you use Microsoft Word or not, you definitely want to outline your report first. Here's my rough sketch of how it's going to flow as far as the different sections. That outline turns into your table of contents. And as it shows on this bullet points, you have a logical sequence and identifying the major criteria points and who wins each criteria point, etc. So it's your framework. And your outline is going to list your headings. And your headings, now it's important that you do these headings properly. So if you use the outline feature on Word, they're all going to have the same hierarchy. So you don't want to, and I'll show you this in a subsequent slide, but you don't want to have your headings be inconsistent. You don't want one heading to be all caps, and then your next main heading is only initial caps. You don't want one heading to be indented and the other ones aren't indented. This is a block format analytical report, which means everything is left aligned, single spaced with a space between paragraphs, just like your other written assignments. But you need to have a proper hierarchy to your headings. Your main headings should probably be all caps, 12-point font. And then your subheadings are going to be initial caps. And that's just where the first letter of each word is capped. And then maybe you have some subheadings underneath there, it's possible. Then those would maybe be italicized. So, and keep your hierarchy of your headings consistent. And you would never have a main heading and then one subheading underneath it. Why? Because then the main heading doesn't, for there to be a subheading, it has to have an A and a B. You can look at this in the textbook for more explanation, but when you have a subheading, it needs to have at least 2 subheads. It can't just be one. Otherwise, if there's only one subhead, all you really have is the main heading. Does that make sense? So make sure the headings have a consistent look. And I'm going to show you some examples of improper headings in a second here, but here are the report heading, the main sections of the report. As I said before, these all caps Headings are your main headings, your main sections of the report text of the report. Introduction, comparative analysis, or analysis by criteria, or analysis, whatever you want to call it. And then recommendation, or final recommendation, or conclusion, whatever you want to call it. Those are your main headings, your main sections of the report. And then underneath that, you would have your subheadings as are listed there. Your outline becomes your table of contents. So please ignore the actual text that's in here. This is of no use to you, but just know that your outline becomes your table of contents. What is your table of contents going to look like? Well, it's going to have preliminary section, and then table of contents, executive summary. And then it's going to have the introductory section and those subheads underneath there. And then it's going to have the works cited section listed there as well. All right, so when we talk about the headings, you can have those main headings. I already covered this so many times, you don't want to hear it again, all caps, and you have subheads underneath that. And there needs to be text underneath each heading. So no heading there wouldn't be a heading and then a subhead underneath it like we see here under organizing the content. And then you need some text underneath each heading, whether it's a main heading or a subheading. And then you want to be consistent. So we're writing in the block format. Everything's left aligned, no indents, single space with a space between paragraphs. So here we see they've got the delivering a dynamic speech. That heading is centered. And then the planning the speech is left aligned. And then the organizing the content heading is left aligned, but it's also underlined. And then the captivating introduction is underlined and centered. Very confusing, right? So keep your headings consistent. And for this report, everything's left aligned. Super simple. Everything's left aligned. So the way we're going to delineate between a main heading and a subheading, main heading will be capitalized, subheading initial caps. And if then there's a subheading, italicized, so we can tell them apart. All right, so keep in mind we're writing an analytical report and it's for business, so we need to be cool and professional in our writing style. So remember, your analytical report is going to be based on research. So your recommendations that you're making, whether it's about cost or culture or convenience of the school, needs to be based on analysis, not on your personal opinion. So make sure that you're using the analysis and the research to guide the decisions that you make. It's not an opinion report, it's a research report. Avoid emotional terms like I hate or I love. So we're trying to write professionally here. And transition phrases from one section of the report to the next. And you can look in the textbook, there's lots of examples of transition phrases, such as therefore, going from that to this point, to link sections of a report together. Headings also serve as transition phrases from one section of the report to the next. All right, we're almost at the end, folks. So the last couple of slides here talk about proposals. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on these because you're not writing a proposal in this course, but you should understand how proposals work. They can be internal. That's maybe you writing a proposal to your boss to expand your department or to promote you to senior vice president. So that's an internal proposal. More commonly, proposals are external. That's the company writing a proposal to another company saying, hire us, use our services. We are tax lawyers. We know tax law, and you should hire us to reduce your tax load expenses for your company. And we're going to write a proposal to you to do that. So the company that's interested in the services would send out a request for proposal. And then the companies that want that company's business would write the actual proposals. When I worked in advertising agencies, we would receive an RFP, request for proposal. That would be from a client. Maybe it's Airwalk Shoes or Sky Vodka. and they're say, we're looking for an agency to do all of our print campaign or to do our outdoor board campaign. And they'd send out a request for proposals. And all these agencies would furiously work on their proposals and their campaign ideas and submit that proposal saying, here's what we will do for you, and here's how much it's going to cost. That's basically what a proposal is. Most of them are external. It can be solicited, meaning the company requested that proposal through a request for proposal or an RFP, or it could be an unsolicited. You're just sending a proposal hoping that the company is going to find it of interest and possibly hire you. So this slide talks about the proposal structure. Again, you're selling to the recipient of the proposal. And that's chapter 11, my friends. So we really spent most of our time talking about how to structure your report. So now hopefully you've got an idea about the preliminary, the report text, and the addenda sections of the report. Hopefully you also have an understanding of how to use headers in the report. Now, if you're unclear about graphics and how to use graphics to support and tell your story for the criteria analysis section of your report, please go back to chapter 10. Chapter 10 is all about how to prepare graphics. Okay, so and then we also talked a little bit about proposals. So that's it for the analytical report stuff. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. The deadline cannot be extended on the analytical report assignment.